welcome to America's Commercial Real Estate Show, your source for market intel, forecasts, and strategies. Hello, I'm Michael Bull. Thank you for being with us. This segment is brought to you by Bull Realty. For customized asset and occupancy solutions, visit bullrealty.com. Well, we have another great show for you today. Look, in commercial real estate, we want to skate where the puck is going, right? We want to think about what's impacting commercial real estate and the economy, what could impact it moving forward so that we can plan accordingly, right, for our commercial real estate endeavors. Well, once a year, the counselors of real estate do their top 10 issues affecting real estate. Today, we're going to cover their top 10 issues affecting real estate for 2022 and 2023. Please welcome my guest. It's Marilee Utter. She's president of City Venture Associates, and she's the 2022 chair of Counselors of Real Estate. Marilee, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you, Michael.
And let's get to it. And some of these are what people would expect, but we're going to go through 1 through 10 and look at a new slant and think about what you might be able to do moving forward with these issues affecting real estate. And of course, the first one's the big one, right? The elephant in the room: inflation and interest rates, right?
Right. It has to be number one this year because it's changing every day. You know, the counselors intentionally release this report mid-year. There's a flurry of reports at the beginning of every year, but things change. And what we're finding is the acceleration and the unexpected causes of the dynamics in our industry are changing every day as well. So the number one issue for us, obviously, is this economy, and we're watching it like everybody else is day to day. I mean, the pandemic caused a big change in our economy, and that was, first the Fed came in, focused on getting jobs back, then came back and said, well, oops, we better fix the inflation. And we were pretty much on track. What we were experiencing was more like a war-like situation where we had a worker shortage going on. We had supply chain disruptions, and yet there was a lot of demand. And so that created inflation. But then along came the war in Europe, in Ukraine. Along came the other kinds of global upsets that are happening to us. And now we're in a world of black swans. It's hard to tell what's going on and what's going to happen next. That's the issue we're all wrestling with. I think the message here, I mean, you all know the statistics of inflation up, but employment is still strong and demand is holding up really pretty well. So like so many of these questions about recession, a lot of it is a self-fulfilling prophecy. It really isn't it established that we're going to go into recession, a technical recession, and does that really matter? As long as consumers keep holding up with their consumption, 70% of GDP, and businesses keep going along, I think we'll be fine. If we do slip into recession, the thought is that it won't be forever. It won't be like the great recession before. By 2024, things should be back on track. However, certainly home prices will slow, and that's a good thing. Volumes should drop a bit. The markets that have seen a really rapid increase are probably going to see a pretty rapid decrease as well. That's what we can be looking forward to. But all in all, that should equalize things and actually make them a little more sustainable.
Yeah. Well, I guess there's some good news in there for sure. Let's think about number 2, geopolitical risk. And you mentioned the war in Ukraine, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, that obviously is having repercussions, and it's the repercussions that we're going to feel in the U.S. Obviously, food prices are going up. The rest of the world is having food shortage, much more desperate situation. We're also seeing a slowing in the recession, inflation, those kinds of dynamics going on in Europe, China, Russia. They're all struggling with it. So these repercussions are going to impact us more than we're used to, I think. Commodity prices are going to go up, and the supply chains are going to suffer. where we'll feel that the most, I think, is with auto. I mean, I mentioned food, autos, technology are going to suffer, electronics quite a bit. And so we should expect that continue. That isn't going to get fixed overnight, no matter what the Fed does.
Yeah. All right, let's jump to number 3, and this is one that kind of everyone's on everyone's mind these days, and that's hybrid work.
Right. This, we know a lot more than we did last year. This issue, back to work, was on our agenda last year, and we're a lot further along in understanding the dynamics. Although obviously the inflation is and the potential for recession is changing those dynamics again every single day. I think it's pretty well established that hybrid work, flexibility in work, depending on the industry and the location to some extent, are going to be part of our future going forward. And so now the question is, how do we adjust? The Harvard Business Review, Stanford, I think across the board, people are saying 2 to 3 days in the office is probably going to be a norm for a lot of people. People want Mondays and Fridays off. So we're working on that and figuring that out. The big surprise out of all this was the big decentralization, the move away from the core city. And this is the first time in decades that you haven't seen people and resources pouring into that inner core in the region. And whether they were moving to a suburb or moving further out to more lifestyle and, more importantly, affordable cities, that's the question of how long will that be sustained, and how strong will that trend be? So that's what we're looking at now. The implications of that, obviously, cities are having to take a look at themselves again. There's still a lot of vacant retail as well as office going on. Workers are back still 40, 45%, maybe on a national average. National averages don't matter so much. It's about your city. But cities are having to rethink them, what they're about, and what amenities they're going to offer. We're going to see a lot more housing amenities, a lot more residential.
Good point. We're going over the Counselors of Real Estate top 10 issues affecting real estate for this year. And number 4, you mentioned briefly before, but number 4 is supply chain disruption.
Right. I think the big idea here is that this was a problem before the pandemic hit, that this industry is being very slow to automate. The communication systems, the management systems just aren't in place. You'd be surprised how much paper is being used instead of virtual data to communicate through all of this. And so there's work to be done in this industry, which means that the supply chains are going to continue to be a challenge. And with that challenge, I think you'll see a lot more automation happening. You're also going to see a lot more friendshoring and nearshoring. CEOs are really worried about this economic disruption. 72% of them in one survey said they were worried about losing their jobs because of this business interruption. And so instead of focusing more on cost cutting and efficiency, it's business, continuity that is the new primary concern. So you're going to see changes in warehousing because of that, automation, as I said, and trying to get better control of supply chain. More things coming back, more manufacturing coming back to the U.S.
Yeah, and at about time. I think it's good to get some of the manufacturing back to the U.S. and have the supply chain, let's not have this happen again, right? Number 5 is energy.
And this year, what a huge topic. But this year we really focused on the energy needs of office buildings and what's going on there. One trend that we're seeing across the board is that the quality of office space is really making a difference in workers' desire to come back. And they want different kinds of amenities than before. First of all, they want it to be healthy and safe. And so a lot on HVAC, lighting, acoustics, daylight, and so on. A lot of design opportunities. You're seeing a lot of architects and a lot of people in design world having opportunities here to rethink office space, workspaces, we should probably call them more appropriately. One of the challenges that goes with that, however, is that the more you fix up those systems, the more greenhouse gases you create. And so there's a direct conflict in many cases between upgrading for health and safety and hurting climate change. Now, a lot of metering can really help that problem, and we're seeing that kick in. So more opportunities for automation. But clearly these buildings are going to have to be upgraded. So Class A will feel very different than Class B and Class C. And those making the investment in the spaces are probably going to see a big improvement in being able to attract and hold their employees over time. The question, a lot of talk has been, oh, well, we'll just turn all that office space at Class B, Class C into residential. Not so easy to do. 10% of office space maybe. Depends on the era and how flexible it is. But you can't count on that to take care of things. The better shot is just to invest in your buildings.
Yeah, good point. And I think one thing will come out of the pandemic that is a positive for us, and that's wellness and healthy. I think hopefully we'll have a more healthy environment, more buildings will get wellness certifications, and we'll have healthier places to work, right? And then number 6 is one that's really seems to be impacting a lot of businesses, or almost every business. That's a labor shortage.
And this has also been a long time coming. It isn't a surprise. Economists have long predicted that the 2020s would be a much slower GDP decade for us. And that's because when the U.S. shifted from labor surplus to labor scarcity. And this is just basic demographics. It has to do with low birth rate, which has huge impacts for us over time. It also early retirements and low immigration. So kind of logical that all of a sudden the workforce is going to shrink and we're going to be shortage. We're going to have a shortage there. Obviously, the pandemic expedited all of that, but boils down to today, you have about twice as many jobs as you have workforce. And everybody says, well, where did they go? Well, the workforce went to better jobs by and large. A lot of the layoffs and the quit rates were in the lower income jobs. And when given a break and a chance to upgrade, they did. They also moved to more affordable communities. So there's this mismatch going on between geography of where the workers are and where they want to be, where they can afford to be because housing is so expensive, and also what their skills are. A lot of people not trained yet and not in the industries where we want them. Obviously, as I said, it's uneven. People in the business and financial sectors much less impacted by this, but obviously retail, hospitality, manufacturing, logistics been hit really hard on all of this. What was the biggest point I would leave you with? I guess it comes back again to that workspaces. That's one strategy that we can be doing. We might be looking at less office space. It's going to be more expensive to make this high quality office space. So designers, occupiers are going to say, can you make it a little smaller if it's going to be so highly amenitized? And then more automation. You can't get workers, you're going to have to automate. So I think across the board, our industries need to be looking at how automation is going to be creeping in.
Yeah, good point. And we're going over the top 10 issues affecting real estate for 2022, 2023 that CRE counselors puts out every year. And number 7, it kind of rolls into what you were just talking about, is the great housing imbalance. Tell us about that.
Right. Well, that's been going on for a while. In the 1980s, we were building about 1.2, we were building about 1 unit for every 1.2 jobs. By the 2010s, we were building 1 housing unit for 2.6 jobs. Today, we're building about 1 housing unit for every 4 jobs. So we're just getting worse. It's not getting better. And then when you look at the pandemic, this is kind of interesting. By March of 2020, something like 52% of young adults had moved in with their parents. Nobody liked that. So a year later, by the same time in 21, a year ago, there was this huge demand, for new household creation as people moved out. And we've obviously seen that impact hitting us. At this point, we're building about 1 million single family units a year, and that's about a third of what the market demand is. In multifamily, we've been building at our top capacity. You see apartment buildings going up in so many cities, but even that is only half of the demand. That's a little over 700,000 units. We're really in a pickle here, and cities that are acting to increase their housing are really going to benefit. Cities that aren't, that don't, and particularly workforce housing, it doesn't have to be technically government affordable housing subsidized, just workforce housing, which I understand is a huge challenge given land prices, entitlements, supply chains, labor costs. I understand the challenges, but somehow communities have to find a way to up their housing capacity. Those that aren't are seeing outflows, San Francisco being the poster child for that right now in the Bay Area. People just can't afford to stay no matter how much they want to. And the other thing that we're seeing obviously economic output drops, your local economy drops when you don't have workers to do the work and attract new businesses. But the other thing is this tie to social unrest and to homelessness, which is in itself is a huge issue and is hurting our downtowns, hurting our communities, hurting our social fabric and our humanity. And there's recent research that shows, yes, the homeless issue is tied to substance abuse, to mental illness and so on, but there's an extraordinarily high correlation between housing shortages and homelessness. So don't ever doubt that creating housing has something to do with reducing that problem that is just permeating our country so badly.
Yeah, certainly a lot of opportunities there. And we're going to the top 10 issues affecting real estate with Marilee Utter, and she's president of City Venture Associates and a CRE counselor and the chair for 2022. And number 8 is regulatory uncertainty.
Right. Our industry loves stability. We like predictability. We like to know what the rules are. Tell us the rules and we can develop according to that. And these times are nothing like that. There is regulation coming at us from every direction. So if you look at the federal level, first of all, it happened with COVID and with the shutdowns, and then also with the financial stimulus and the virtually cash infusions that came back to help the economy. So that was huge impact that we weren't planning on. There was tenant eviction moratoriums were part of that. And a lot of that regulation is still hanging on and is still in there. But then along came the states and the cities. So much innovation in our country is coming from the states and the cities. They're frustrated with what's going on in Washington. Things aren't going fast enough or the way they want them to go. So they're coming up with their own regulations. Obviously, all kinds of battles with the Supreme Court now about which prevails, national law or state law. And there's also conflicts going on between states passing regulatory mandates and cities losing control of land use. So there's squabbles between cities and states and feds. And then there's all these other rules that are coming out. They tend to be, at the local level, they tend to be a lot about environmental, although that's the feds obviously have a lot of environmental going on as well, a lot of environmental, and then a lot around affordable housing because of this housing shortage that we talked about already. So there's all kinds of rules about the quality of what you're building, the availability, the mandatory, inclusionary zoning, what percentage of affordable housing do you have to build, what kind of fees do you have to pay. All of those things are just layering on as the country and the world goes through these economic cycles that we're not really going even through the typical economic cycles that we're used to, the kind you learned in school, that things go up, things go down, we have inflation, recession, comes back. I think the context now is much more like having an earthquake with aftershocks. We went through a big pandemic shock, came back, we thought things would even out, and then all these other things happened, like supply chains and global disruptions and so on. And it's aftershocks that keep coming at us, which make it very unpredictable. And so the regulatory system is trying to respond to even things out. And it's just adding on and making it tougher and more expensive to develop and to manage. So this is, this is tough. I guess if you say, how do you get ahead of it? It's really trying to look at these ESG issues, which is really our one of our issues too, and getting into that and getting ahead of it and being proactive because there's so much regulation.
Yeah, it would certainly help the housing situation as well if we could cut down some of the regulatory, blocking things, making things more expensive. All right, and number 9 is cybersecurity interruptions.
Right. Well, it's finally happening. So we've been doing technology improvements across our industry for a long, long time, and some really wonderful systems improvements in HVAC and lighting and things like that. Building operations, elevators, building access, all kinds of cool technology improvements. The problem is that they haven't been working together. It's been kind of siloed development. And so there isn't a systems approach to that, and there isn't the expertise in the industry to protect us from cybersecurity. And now with all the global issues going on, wars and so on, the attacks are starting, and they're very real, and they're everywhere. So we've got Russian malware being found in HVAC contractors' systems. There's international hackers, the ransomware people have gotten into the Boston Children's Hospital HVAC system. Iranian documents have been intercepted that show they actually have the names of manufacturers for HVAC, lighting, and monitoring systems. So these things are happening, and they're happening around us. It's not just a foreign threat anymore. It's really happening. And so, the typical answer is, well, I'm sure against that, or I'll hire experts to take care of it. Well, guess what? The insurance is going away. GL, general liability, property insurance generally have exclusions to cybersecurity threats. And even if you buy riders, often those lead to litigation. So it's unavailable, very expensive, and ultimately may not give you the coverage that you think you need. It's even reaching now to directors and officers' liability policy. So the insurance aspect is really a problem. And the impacts obviously are profound. Not only could you're offering, building and safety risks. You could close down the building for a while with a building stoppage. You're offering potentially full access to your building, to your company's systems, and all your access to your data that can have brand damage associated with it, of course. And ultimately, it's one more thing. That means it's going to be more expensive to build and operate our buildings. but we've got to be realistic. I mean, the day after February 24th, the day after Russia invaded Ukraine, all of a sudden cybersecurity activity in the US just skyrocketed. So it's real.
Yeah, it certainly spiked up. It's been kind of crazy, and I agree with you. We have to be really proactive about that. And number 10 is ESG requirements forcing change.
Right, right. We've heard about ESG again for several years. This isn't a new topic by any means. What's different now is there's finally being the regulation. We're finally seeing the regulation that we expected. And that the good news is that's being forced by consumers, by individuals and companies and investors and shareholders saying, guess what? You've got to get serious about these issues or it's going to impact our long-term viability. So in the US, in 2021, the SEC established the ESG Enforcement Task Force. In 22, they issued this warning that said, you better get serious because we're going to do additional scrutiny on your reports. You can't just kind of greenwash these things anymore. We're going to be really looking at what kind of measures and how you're following through. And they also made a proposal, which is still out there and pending, that said that all public companies would have to disclose their greenhouse gas and their climate change impacts, their risk disclosures, and they're pretty rigorous risk disclosures. They have to do with both the physical risk and the transition risk of getting your company to that level of performance. So USA is stepping it up through the SEC. Europe, of course, has always been ahead of us on this. But they also are being pretty strict in stepping up their rigor. I mean, look at the fires and the heat they're experiencing. For them, is so real right now. So UK has the green finance system that they're using. The EU has its European climate law that calls for greenhouse neutrality by 2050. I mean, we're looking for 50% reduction. They're at neutrality, so they're really hitting it. And then, as we said earlier, the cities and the states are getting much more active too because things aren't moving as fast as they think they need to. So right now we have over 30 cities and 4 states that are requiring benchmarking, again, on climate change measures, and they're using reports then to go back to their businesses and say, hey, step it up here. Several cities, in fact, are mandating cuts, including New York, Boston, DC, Denver, I'm happy to report. So that's really hitting us, and as I said, primarily on the climate change. But ESG is environmental, social, and governance. We're seeing the governance through the laws being put in place. Talked about environmental. Social is coming up too. There's expectations about health and wellness, as we talked about a few minutes ago, and also diversity, racial diversity. So you can be looking forward to that kind of pressure regulation coming up in the future as well. I mean, the opportunities for design and development, again, are there because now that it's being mandated, people can't say, well, I'll just, accept a little lower rent. They're going to have to fix their buildings of all kinds, and they're going to have to track the portfolio. One of the more successful strategies we're seeing is, again, building owners, portfolio managers, getting ahead of the regulations, knowing where they stand so that they can plan their capital outlays and their budgets. And they're using this carbon risk real estate monitor, CREAN, which gives them, it's a software product that gives them the feedback they need, and then they can see where they stand. So you're going to be seeing a lot more ESG coming along.
Yeah, I agree with that. Well, Marilee, as you guys went through the CRE counselors, it's a great group. If my listeners and viewers, if you're not familiar with them, check them out. We'll put a link at the show website, creshow.com, to the actual report. But Marilee, as you guys went through this and you've been involved in it and talking about it, what would you leave our audience with to think about moving forward?
Well, I would say 2 things. One, be mindful, because the world, things are changing so quickly right now. Be attentive to things that you maybe thought didn't relate to real estate, didn't relate to your business, didn't relate to your life. Every day right now is bringing us a change, and we need to be really quick and responsive. The other part I would say is go for improvements. Make the investment to invest in your spaces and bring them up. The labor shortage, the housing shortage, those spaces really need to be improved. So if you're in those niches, go for it. Make the investment now. It's not going to get any cheaper, and it will do you very well.
Well said, and great interview, Marilee. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks. My pleasure.
All right, and thank you for joining us around the country. Hey, please review the show. Please share the show. Please subscribe wherever you get the show. If you're getting on Apple Podcasts, you're getting on YouTube. If it's YouTube, hit that subscribe button and hit the bell for notifications, all that great stuff, right? And thanks for being with us. And until next week, be sure that you always lead, learn, and laugh. And join us for America's Commercial Real Estate Show. America's Commercial Real Estate Show is brought to you by Buxton. Take leasing, site selection, and due diligence to the next level. Make the right decisions with on-demand mobile data. Visit buxtonco.com. By Bull Realty. For proven commercial real estate asset and occupancy solutions, contact me. My email is michael@bullrealty.com. By Commercial Agent Success. Expert-level commercial real estate broker training. Cloud Access 1, up to 21 one-hour videos. Visit commercialagentsuccess.com. Thank you for reviewing, subscribing, and sharing America's Commercial Real Estate Show.